Hello everyone, my name is Micah Bull. My family and I are missionaries to Japan, and though we just started on deputation, we have not had much of experience. But I would like to be an encouragement to you and to share with you testimony and also the truth that God has put in my heart to maybe be a blessing to you. Now, to some of you it may not apply because maybe perhaps you already know the truth and you understand how to trust God in situations of trials. But I would like to share with you the life of Job, and in Job, we've studied the story and we know about him in the Bible. In the book of Job, it talks about the situations that he goes through. And he loses his family, he loses his live crops, he loses his livestock, he loses everything that he owns. What's interesting though is Job has two perspectives during his trials. And during the trial of his life, he begins to look at his situation in different ways. And I would like to share with you, and I think that's what happens in our life. And it's easy for us to look at circumstances in two different ways. And there's just two perspectives that I would like to share with you. And the first perspective would be Job became self-conscious. And now I'm going to go through the Bible and show you why he became self-conscious. And so the first part, and during his life, when he lost everything, his crops, his livestock, his children. What's interesting though is Job wasn't self-conscious yet. He was still conscious about God. He still realized that God was in control. And the Bible says in Job chapter 1 verse 21, and it says, "And naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. And so during that time, he still trusted God. He didn't charge God foolishly, as the Bible says. And he didn't want to say, when in the future, when he says curse the day, he didn't want to curse his day yet. What's interesting is that he's blessing God. And he's saying, everything that's happened to me around me, I'm still going to bless the Lord. Everything that has happened, I'm still not going to charge God foolishly. But then his perspective changes. And the question is, what happened? Number one is he became self-conscious, as I said before. And he began to look at the situation around him. But how did he become self-conscious? I believe when his friends had come to him was the moment and the time where he began to look at himself. Because his friends were coming and they were sitting with him, they were weeping, and they were just sitting there and couldn't even speak a word because they were mourning so much for their friend. And Job begins to look at them and he begins to feel sorry. I believe he begins to feel sorry for himself. And so as he's looking at his situation, he's starting to look inward and looking on himself and saying, I'm in boils. I've been touched by Satan. And as soon as Satan touched his body, he began to look at himself and say, look at what's happened. Look at what God is doing. And what's really sad is Job begins to say, cursed be the day that he was ever born. He says, cursed be the day that I was born. I wish I was never born. I wish that God had never gave me life. And he begins to look in at his surroundings and begins to say, I feel bad for myself. I'm weeping. I'm in so much pain. I'm in so much agony. And I believe he begins to charge God foolishly. And the situation in our life, if something has happened, I'm not making anything light. It's hard to go through a trial. I've heard over and over again is that things are meant for good. And in 2012, as a freshman in Bible college, I had a phone call and received from my mom that my father was sick. And it was a situation that I didn't understand. I was away from home. I was 2,000 miles away. I didn't know what happened. And I just know that he had went into a coma. And then Thanksgiving Day, my Thanksgiving Day of 2012 was, the best thing I could say was I was thankful that my dad was still alive. Though he was in a coma, I whispered in his ear and I said, I'm thankful that you're alive. And that's the best thing I could think of. Honestly, it was supposed to be a day of Thanksgiving to think about how good God has been. And it was hard for me. The best thing I could tell God was, I'm just thankful that my dad was still there. To me, the situation wasn't good. Though I read Romans 8:28 over and over again, and in 2012, December 6th, my father passed away. And he went home to be with the Lord. And to me, that wasn't good. And I hear people say all the time that it's meant for your good. Or I heard people, I heard it preached over and over again, Romans 8:28, how it talks about it's meant for our good. But I didn't understand that. What did that mean? What did for good mean? How could it be good? How could taking my father away as an 18-year-old, I didn't learn how to pay credit card debt. I didn't learn how to buy a car yet with my own credit card. I didn't learn how to buy a house yet. All that was, I thought my father was going to teach me as soon as I graduated from college, or during college. I was expecting him to teach me if I came home for the holidays or the summertime. But that never happened. And so to me, that wasn't good. It wasn't a good situation. And I became self-conscious. I began to think about, why would God do this? I still have yet to get married and my father to be there at my wedding. I still have yet to be at graduation. My father would never be able to watch me walk and receive a diploma. And I didn't understand. To me, it wasn't good. And the same thing with Job. To Job, he began to look at himself and say, this situation is not good, because now it has affected me. I've seen people pass away. I've seen people in the church pass away. And I believed in my heart that I always would say, I know it's for good. I know it's for their good. I know God has a reason for it. I trust God. And now Job began to curse the day that as he was cursing the day, I couldn't do that. I knew that God created life and God gave me life. And I didn't want to charge God foolishly. And I believed we trusted in the situation. I trusted in him. But the same thing with Job. Job began to look at himself, and so did I. And so that's just a testimony I want to share with you, and how Job, I'm not relating to Job. There's no way. I didn't lose as much as he lost. But I will say this, I believe perspectives changed. And because perspectives changed, we look at the situation, and when we do, we begin to question the motives that God had and the reason God did everything. But then we understand Job's life later, God rebukes him. It says, remember who created you. Remember who created the world. Can you measure the earth like I have? Can you do this or that? Whatever God did. And Job is basically being questioned by God and saying, are you me? Do you understand why I did everything in your life? There's a reason for it. And Job realizes, and in Job chapter 42, in verse 5, it says, I have heard thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth. And so now Job sees the perspective. Number 2 is God conscious. He was God conscious now. He's thinking like what God is thinking about. He's seeing why God is doing everything in his life. And now he's understanding it was meant for good. And that's what that verse meant. Meant for good. The situation was not good, but it's for good. And I'm not making light of anything that happens in life. I'm not making light of losing a baby. I'm not making light of losing a father or mother or grandfather or whoever you may lose, or whatever situation. Maybe it's not loss in the family. Maybe it's bankruptcy. Maybe it's whatever you can think of. I'm not making light of that. But to encourage you, I would like to let you know that don't forget about what God has done in your life. Remember that who God is. When you begin to look at God, perhaps that would help you to remember the truth that God is only good. And you say the situation around me is not good, but don't look at the situation. Don't look at the circumstances that are happening now. But remember who God is. Remember that He's the one who controls everything. He's the one who has it done for your good. Maybe someone down the road needs your help. Maybe you'll lose a loved one. Or maybe someone you're helping at in the church, or someone you meet, someone you witness to will lose a loved one. And they won't understand why God does things. Many atheists become atheists because they see God in the situation that they put Him in. And they curse God. They charge God foolishly. There are many Christians who become atheists because they look at their situation and have self-pity. They become self-conscious. Why would God do this? Doesn't He love me? Why would God cause me pain? Doesn't He care? but then they're not realizing that God is doing it for their good. God is wanting them to be stronger, or perhaps it's because God wants them closer to spending time with Him. Whatever situation has happened, whatever circumstance may happen in your life, may you remember that to be God conscious. May you think about what God is doing, and that is for your good. Not necessarily a good situation, but it's meant for your good. And hopefully that will be an encouragement to you. And life is hard. Life can get hard. And again, I have not experienced many things. I've only lost my father and my grandfather, and maybe you've lost all of your family. Maybe you have no one else alive. Maybe you have a circumstance that you don't understand how you're going to get through it. But always remember that God is only good because of who He is. And focus on Him. And if you stay focused on God, I believe you can get through your trial. May this be an encouragement to you and a blessing to you. Thank you for listening.